Hi everyone, I'm John Epper, the Trust and Connection Maximizer. Welcome to another episode of Two Talk Smart, where I am interviewing the past and present movers and shakers, the heavy hitters of the Wisconsin chapter of the National Speakers Association. My guests will share their ideas and strategies about growing a successful speaking business and having some fun doing it. Topics will fit into the National Speakers Association 4 E's of the speaking business, including enterprise, expertise, eloquence, and ethics. My guest on this episode of Two Talk Smart is Tina Hallis, Ph.D. Tina is certified in positive psychology through the WholeBeing Institute, trained in positive intelligence, and an authorized partner for Everything Disc. She is the author of Sharpen Your Positive Edge, shifting your thoughts for more positivity and success. Tina worked for 20 plus years in biotechnology before discovering a new science called positive psychology in 2011. Seeing the powerful impact this information had on improving lives and organizations, she decided to create her own company, The Positive Edge. Her focus is to share insights and strategies that make work more enjoyable and help organizations become more successful. Morning, Tina.
Good morning, John. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you today?
Good.
I'm looking forward to this, Tina. This is an episode of Two Talk Smart, and we want to find out, this is something I'm using as a resource for people in Academy, in the NSAA chapter, Wisconsin chapter. How did you get into the speaking business? What was it that motivated you to become a speaker?
Oh my gosh. Okay. How to make a short version of that long story. Even when I was in biotech, I would have opportunities to speak to our department at conferences or with customers. And I just really enjoyed it. And then one time I don't even remember how it happened, but I was invited to speak at our local National Honor Society for the kids. And I loved it. And I thought, well, maybe someday I'll speak on topics that I'm more excited about than just the products we were selling or developing back at my biotech company. And then I ended up getting laid off. And I think it was even like the next week I had found NSA, Wisconsin, and was attending my first meeting.
And then you were hooked?
I was hooked. I think, I'd been grateful because even when I was in biotech, they brought in some training to help us become better speakers. So we could speak at conferences on our products and with customers. But NSA, it was like, wow, so how do you do this as like a business? That was really scary. So to me, it was such a gift to discover NSA right away like that.
What were some of the takeaways for you in the early days of deciding to be a speaker and joining the Speaker Association? What were some of the things that kept moving you forward?
I think one of it was just how welcoming the meetings were and all the members were. I felt like I immediately belonged, which was really helpful because here my whole life I had identified as a scientist in a corporation, and now I was feeling that loss of identity and like, oh my gosh, there's so much uncertainty. But here I felt accepted and like, wow, here's a group that gets me. So the people were really, really valuable in getting through that initial stress and overwhelm. And then also just, I think, knowing that here I was surrounded by people who were doing this, and it wasn't some mysterious, scary thing. I mean, these people were figuring it out and were making it happen. And so if they could do it and they were willing to help me, this was where I wanted to be.
Who are some of the people that have been your mentors, people that have either guided you or that you've looked up to?
Oh my gosh, in those early days, Patty Hendrickson has been, such a huge personality person, contributor. So she's really been someone I've always looked up to. Back in the day, I was encouraged to get on the board right away. And so serving with people like Carrie Landsberg and Brian Uterman, and then just, oh my gosh, there's names that are slipping my mind right now, but there was just so many people that were willing to have conversations, that were willing to meet and talk. Yeah, I wish I could, if I had a better memory, I could rattle off a long list right now.
Sure. Do you have things that come to mind that are nuggets of wisdom that you that made your light bulb go on, that helped you put things together or really inspired you to do things in a way that was going to be successful for you?
Yes, for sure. I think, and I've heard this from a lot of other people, so I don't think it's just me, but when you go to the meetings at NSA and you hear from all these successful speakers, you can get overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that they have done to get their business up and running. And you can go away just feeling like, oh my gosh, there's no way I can do all this stuff. And I think the nuggets that I have learned along the way is, one, there's not just one way to do this and make it happen, right? It's not like, here's the one recipe everybody has to follow. I loved learning how there's different ways. And when you can find what works for you, what's a good fit for your personality, do you like writing? Do you prefer to do videos, right? Like this? Do you prefer to, what is your favorite way to reach other people? Is it networking? I tried that. And for me, I'm an introvert. It wasn't a good use of my time, but I would much rather get out there and speak for free for marketing to get people to hear what I do, speak at conferences, at chambers. And so those were two big nuggets that I learned. I would say another one I want to mention is that when you help others, like even as a beginner, as you start to learn and develop skills, as you reach out and help your fellow students, your fellow members, everyone gets lifted. And that was one of after working in corporate America, that was sort of like, wow, this is so cool, right? This abundance mentality, the Cabot mentality of helping each other, and how that one of the best ways to get ahead is just to help other people.
I think that's something that Zig Ziglar has said. If you want, you can have anything you want as long as you help a lot of other people get what they want. And I knew that lesson before I ever joined NSA.
Yeah, that's cool. Because for me, it was something new, and it was amazing how powerful and fun it was, right? It just like, you're kidding. So, meeting these people and helping other people and having fun doing it is actually, helping my business too. So that was a great discovery.
What were some of the ways you found to be of service to other people?
The thing I love is that, like at NSA meetings, we're encouraged to reach out to each other, to set up meetings, to have phone calls. And so when people would do that, I loved just chatting and sharing, whatever I had been learning. I offered to be a mentor through the chapter, and had some different mentoring meetings and mentored different people. And serving on the board, being trying to be involved and helping out that way too.
Those are all really good things. And that's something that you and I have done that together too, where we're just checking in with each other, having calls on a regular basis. And that's been invaluable to me. And I really appreciate those conversations because they've helped me a lot. What are some of the things that you really love about being a speaker?
And I think this is such an interesting question because I am more of an introvert. And so for me, getting up in front of other people, I have to push myself. It's like once I get up there and I'm comfortable with my content, I can have so much fun. And yet there's definitely, I think, a barrier to me where, I tend to like people one-on-one or in small groups, and you get in front of a big crowd, and I'll even share, for me, this is energy draining to some extent, but at the same time, I have to tell you, when I can share some of the stuff I've learned about positive psychology and just how to live a better life, share some of my stories and how it's impacted me, And then I get feedback afterwards and hear about how people are like, oh, I just, that really resonated with me, or I needed to hear that message, or, what would you do about this situation? They got a specific experience they want some advice on. And it feels like I'm making an impact, like it's more tangible. When I was in biotech, here it was like, oh, I'm working on products and services to help find cures for cancer. But it was so obscure and far away, and felt like, I never got a sense that anything I did was really having an impact. But now it is much easier to measure and to see and to feel that satisfaction.
So people come up to you or let you know somehow that something you've said has had an impact for them.
Right. Yeah. Could be after my talks, or even like with my weekly positivity tips that I send out to, let audience members sign up, getting feedback on that. It feels like doing good, that you're helping make the world a better place, even in small ways.
Sometimes it's an inch at a time or a step at a time. Talk about your topic and how you zeroed in on that topic for yourself.
Yeah, interesting. I was back, and I was at my biotech company. I was at a 3-day workshop, and in the back of the room, the instructor had brought all these books. And one of those books was The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. One of the books I just happened to pick up and page through, and it was the first time I'd ever heard of positive psychology. And as I was paging through this book, I'm like, wow, here's a science on how to live a more enjoyable, better, more satisfying, purposeful life. So of course I ended up getting the book, and fast forward like a year and a half later, and I decided to become certified in positive psychology with Tal Ben-Shahar, who's a big thought leader in this area. I don't know. It's just like one of those fortuitous occasions that book happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I picked it up. And granted, I've definitely had people tell me that I just tend to be a pretty positive person. I mean, I never thought about how I could maybe reach other people or share ideas with other people. But now, coming from that science background and with my science background, I love the idea that, there's a way to reach more people who, some people who see it as fluff, something, kind of new age, when it's like, no, there's studies on this. There's actual research and, science to explain neuroscience, psychology, behavioral science. So I thought that was really cool.
The book, what was the name of that book again?
The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. And he also has a fabulous TED Talk too.
Okay. Good. So those are things that people can look up. And is that book still available? Do you know?
Oh, yes. Yep. Yeah. And there is a funny story how, so Tal Ben-Shahar, who I got certified through, he taught one of the first positive psychology courses at Harvard. And the first semester he taught it, there was 8 people signed up and 2 dropped out. And by the third time he taught it, there was like 800 students signed up. And by the 4th year he taught it, he invited Shawn Achor, the author of The Happiness Advantage, to be his TA, right? This was years before either one of them wrote their books. So they actually worked together at Harvard, teaching the most popular course, I think, for a number of years. And just this idea of like, here's all these really, motivated, driven students at this prestigious competitive school. And yet they were so drawn to this idea of how can we be more resilient, happier. I thought that's really cool.
Do you have a story or an incident where someone came up and said something about what you said has dramatically changed their life or made them think differently or changed them from being a naysayer about this whole positive psychology into someone who really bought into it? Do you have anything that you can remember about a story like that?
I think I have a story, but I think one of the hardest things about being a speaker versus a situation where maybe you're a consultant and you have more long-term interactions, so you get to see the change and maybe get feedback on the change. We kind of, at least for most of my speaking, I go in and do one thing. But there's a story, actually the very first year, I started speaking on this. I just did a small group through my yoga studio. And I'll never forget, there was this guy from Germany, who attended one of my first talks, and he was arguing everything I was saying. Like everything I said, he was like, we need to be, more worried about stuff and be more stressed about stuff. And that drives us to do better and blah. I mean, just everything I said. I mean, in a relatively nice way, right? I mean, he really wanted to understand. And it was about a year or two later, I just happened to run into him, maybe in yoga class or around town. And he commented to me, he says, that day with what you said, he goes, that changed my life so much. He goes, it's like, it challenged everything I thought and believed. And I now really embrace that. And it's impacted my relationship with my wife and how happy I am. And I'm just like, whoa, so those people, right, who seem to be the ones that are like, no way, you plant a few seeds and you just never know.
Right. Sometimes those are the ones who show the most growth because they come from so far away from what you were talking about. Same thing as a teacher, those seeds are planted. And the times when students come back and say, you did this, or you said this, or I remember this about your class, we don't often get those, but those are really gold when we do get them.
And I even think, like, with my daughter, like tomorrow is actually parent teachers conferences. And I asked if her dad and I could go, and because she usually comes with, but I want just the two of us to go because I want to share some of those things that she says about her teachers. And I think if she was there, she would feel uncomfortable about it. But, those teachers, that they make such a huge impact, and they commonly never know.
I'm sure they'd appreciate that. So Tina, when you're looking for places to speak, and you had mentioned speaking for free before, how do you go about it? How do you line up those places to speak for free or for fee?
It's interesting. Now my daughter's older, she's 17, but when I started all this, she was 7. And so I really wanted to speak closer to home and not be gone overnight. I mean, her love language is quality time, and having mom gone was kind of a big deal. So I really focused on within driving distance. I really focused, I started just looking at libraries, started looking at chambers, started looking at various clubs like Optimist clubs, Kiwanis, and then, trying to do some research on local conferences. The cool thing, I live in Baraboo close to the Dells, and a lot of conferences come to the Dells, and to sometimes just stop in at the Kalahari and look and see, well, what conferences are here this weekend, and, think about how to reach out to them for future ones. And so for me, I think a lot of it was doing research about conferences and associations that were coming to this area, local Wisconsin chapters of various things. And then somebody sees you, and if they like you, then they want to bring you into their company. And I think that's probably been my biggest referral source. I've also been a member of things like the Bash and Speaker Match. And I've certainly gotten some things from that, but word of mouth is my favorite for sure.
And some of the best marketing, really, having other people do your marketing for you. Just briefly, the Bash and Gig Masters, can you just explain what those are briefly?
Yeah, and there's been some other ones throughout. I think there's one called Gig Salad, Speaker Match, but it's like you pay an annual fee, maybe $300, $400, and then they have a website where people can go, and they've got really good SEO. So if you go in and search like Wisconsin motivational speaker, there'll be some of the top sites that come up, and then people will go to those sites and start, exploring. And if your profile is on there, then they can reach out to you. Or some of these places, the client will come in and post the speaker that they're looking for, and then the company will match and send you the speaker leads that you can send proposals to. So for someone like me who is an introvert and is not really big on networking, it's been a great way to reach some more opportunities.
And we've talked about that too. And it's nice to get those leads that come into the inbox. There is a trick to getting the proposal accepted and all of those things, but it is one way to find leads. And when you're looking for speaking opportunities, or someone comes to you and says, hey, we'd like you to come and speak for us, that's one way. Do you do much outreach in terms of cold emailing or cold calling?
I've wanted to, and I've thought about it, but honestly, it's one of those things that, at least for me, and it feels painful. It just feels like so much of a struggle. And I think it's so different for everybody. I'm not saying it's not a good option. I just think you have to find what works for you. And I think, again, it's like one of those things like, how bad do you need it? How much, what's the payoff versus the pain? So, for me, I would, rather than doing cold calls or cold emails, I would, I've got a number, I served on the board and actually on the programming committee for our local SHRM chapter. And I would much rather do that kind of, again, serving others, trying to connect with others that way than a selling way. It just feels much easier for me. And my goal is how much of the time can I feel like I'm floating downstream versus fighting the current and struggling to go upstream? And my goal is to find more ways that feel easy and fun than painful.
Right. The push the easy button. Have you ever seen those from, I think it's from, I can't think of the store, but they actually have an easy button that you can push.
Yeah.
I often think of that, and I often forget that the easy button is the easier way to do it. Like you said, floating downstream instead of trying to swim upstream. And I think that's important to remember too, that everybody has to find what works for them. I know there are some people who say 100 emails a day, and that's like, how do you do that? So it's really a matter of finding what works best for you individually.
Yeah. I mean, for example, I've been sending out weekly positivity tips to my list for about 9 years, and I do it until actually just very recently, very consistently. And so, for me, that's been my investment, and it's brought me some work. Again, it's something that for me, it's easy because I just look at my week and I'm like, oh gosh, what happened this week that I could share, that I got a chance to practice my positivity skills and just tell a little short story. And so for me, that's been one of the ways that I stay connected.
Well, the beautiful thing about that is you have all of those people on your list, and you can reach out to them, like you say, once a week, every other week, but you always have those people on that list. And chances are most people don't drop off the list unless they absolutely don't want your content. They may not always open it up, but at least you have that list that you can connect with whenever you want to.
That was one of the very first things I learned from NSA. It's like, don't just trust social media, build your own list, get that newsletter, even if it's once a month, just something where you're serving others while also staying connected with your audience.
Do you have a story about, or do you have something about the speaking business that you absolutely don't like, and maybe you have a story that goes along with that, like your worst speaking event, or the thing you dread the most? Or
okay, so one of the things that comes to my mind is technology, right? When it doesn't work. And I've been even at a convention center speaking, and the darn projector goes out. And so you're speaking without slides, which for some people that's really easy, but for me, I really rely on my slides. And so then they're busy trying to get a new projector in, and they can't get it to work. And you're trying to build the whole thing into your talk. Like, look, I planned this. This is an example of, how you can just go with the flow and be positive and not get stressed out. And so, honestly, that first time when I connect my computer and I'm hoping all the stars align and it comes on is probably one of the things is the most stressful, because, most of the time it's all fine, but I commonly used to travel with my own projector too, just because those few times it was a problem, oh my gosh, it was so nice to just go out to the car and grab my own projector and get everything hooked up. And even starting late was better than not having anything at all. And now, I mean, even when you bring a backup copy, it doesn't mean someone there is going to necessarily have a computer. Sometimes they do. I bring a printed copy of my slides in case that's the only thing I have to help me go through my talk. So it's like, how can you have a number of backups?
So as a seasoned speaker, you've learned to prepare for those things that might go wrong.
Yes. And try to, again, use them as teaching moments.
Mm-hmm. Right. I had that happen to me a couple of different times in the same moment in my slides. My computer froze up at the exact same spot in my slide deck twice. And the second time, I just close things off. I have like a 10-second rule. If I can't make the technology work, I just try to go on. In a small group setting, that's okay. People came up to me afterwards and said, did you plan that? Because after that, after you closed your computer down, it was just so much more relatable. And it was really the best thing then that I said, no, I didn't plan it, but thank you.
Oh, that's a great one.
And some of it is learning how to roll with it. And you can't really know how to roll with it if you haven't done it enough.
So true.
What are some ideas, maybe one or two pieces of suggestion, advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out building their speaking business? What are some things that they should really keep in mind as they're getting started?
Keep it simple. You don't have to do everything at once. Out of all the plethora of ways that you can market and do everything, pick one or two to experiment with. I am a big experimenter, right? And if something doesn't feel right, or if it's not fun, or you have problems with it, drop it for now and try something different. There's lots of different ways to do this. Same thing, even for your structure of your talk, for the way you do your talk, for even the topic that you speak on. Experiment, play with things. How can you make it more impactful, more memorable? How can you stand out? I'll never forget. So here I come from this whole world of being a scientist, and now I want to be a speaker. And I was trying so hard to figure out, how do I make that conversion? And then someone said to me, I think it was actually during Speaker Academy, was like, you're just like every other speaker. You have to stand out and be different. And I'm like, I achieved what I wanted. And now everyone's telling me that that's a bad thing, right? So again, be you, be different, combine your story, your past, your experience, your strengths in a unique way. And don't be afraid to experiment with it. It's like, one of the things I do is I actually do a little chemistry during some of my talks. I bring some solutions that are clear and I mix them and they turn cloudy. And now I actually have volunteers from the audience do the mixing. And it's this idea of how our negativity clouds our thinking and we see things through this negative lens. And then I have them add another clear solution and it clears up the cloudy solution. And I talk about how this is our goal today, how we want to see the world more clearly and not through this negative filter. So just trying to find unique ways, right? Because you want people to be like, oh, I'm not going to forget this talk. I'm not going to forget John's talk because he did this really cool thing,
That's been a recurring theme throughout the interviews that I've done, is that people say, be yourself, stop trying to be somebody else, and I think we all struggle. I know for me, I've struggled with it too, wanting to be just like so-and-so, or wanting to have this kind of style. And it didn't work because it wasn't me. So the quest has been to find me and how I present and how I do my business. And that's been a recurring theme. I think that's a really good one.
Okay, well, let me just make one comment on that, because one of the things I've discovered is that when you are being yourself and when you are really obviously comfortable with your content, but when you can be up in front of the audience having fun, then it's a very good chance your audience is going to have fun and you're going to have an impact. And it's a very good chance that you're being who you really are. Because when you're up there and you're like, I'm going to forget what I'm going to say, or this doesn't feel right, chances are you're trying too hard or you're trying to be somebody else.
Yes, I agree. Because the audience will get what we feel. They will get
For
what
sure.
we feel. And I think the thing that I wanted to say too, you said you don't try to be not be like everybody else, but we only have to stand out a little bit. Someone made the comment, you don't have to be a mile ahead of somebody. You just have to be an inch ahead of somebody. And people will find you and they'll like what you do because you're a little bit different and you're being yourself and they relate to who you're being in that moment. And when they see you on video or when they see you speak in person. So Tina, this has been really fun. Can you give us one closing thought about the speaking business, about your involvement in the business as a speaker, something that we can just take away in this last moment here?
I would wrap it up by saying that honestly, one of my biggest gifts from being down this path and connecting with NSA has been this connection of community and of like-minded people who want to make the world a better place. I mean, I've just never met so many people who I can have really deep, meaningful conversations with so quickly and really just feel like, wow, they get me. They get what I'm about. And when you find your tribe, it is so much easier to be yourself and to grow into yourself and to build those strengths versus, I love my corporate experience. I really did. I love the science. And the people were great, but it was a very different dynamic. It just wasn't nearly as deep, I guess, and as meaningful.
That's a really great point to end on. Once you find your tribe, it feels like home.
Yes, it does. And you will find friends for life.
Exactly. Tina, this has been great. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, John.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of 2 Talk Smart. Look for more episodes in the very near future. I'm John Nepper. Let's change the world one conversation at a time.